Hey everyone, this is Sreth, and you are tuning in to Stories on Sunset. And every week I will be telling a story of my concert journalism days in Los Angeles. This week I will be telling the story of my experience with the band Filter. Uh, they were known for the songs "Hey Man, Nice Shot," "Take a Picture," "Trip Like I Do," um, and it took place at the Roxy. And what I'm doing with my stories, because I'm raising funds for my own festival in Colorado, is that I'm using this as a platform to raise funds for GoFundMe accounts uh, or however their fundraising is set up for their staff, for like the Rainbow Bar and Grill, the Vibe Room, Amoeba, Troubadour, the Corazon Cinnamon Cafe, the Laugh Factory, the world famous comedy store, and Whiskey A Go Go. The links are in the description box below the video. So if you can, donate to them, and their funds goes to their staff and the venue and stuff. I wish the Roxy had one set up, but they don't. So if you want, just drop money in their mailbox or something when you're on the Sunset Strip. Anywho, after this story, I'm gonna link this story to the following bands: Misfits, Danzig, Sam Hain, Typo Negative, Puddle of Mud, Volto, Bizarre Ride Live, and A Perfect Circle. It's gonna be a crazy trip. No pun intended with a trip like I do. Um, with this filter story. Like as I mentioned earlier, I was a concert journalist out in Los Angeles. Um, back in I'd say 2012 to 2014. And in that time, I saw like 50 years of music, and it was incredible. It was like a time machine. And what I mean by 50 years of music is I got to see that UFO at the Key Club, and the Doors, minus Jim Morrison, at the House of Blues on the Sunset Strip. But this story is about the filter, and it was at the Roxy Theater, and I remembered being like the first one in line because they didn't have a barricade like for a photo pit. And before the show started, um, I remembered seeing the drummer. His name's Jeff Friedel, and he was wearing a Misfits shirt. And at first, I didn't recognize him because it had been like a couple of months or like a year or so or something like that, from the last time I saw him. Because I gave him this like look, like, man, I know you from somewhere, but I can't really remember where I saw you. And it turns out that he was actually the drummer for A Perfect Circle the time I saw him, and we'll get to that story shortly after this one. So I go and cover filter. I showed them my ID, and they let me in. They had a ticket ready for me, and I was on the guest list, which is the cool thing about my job. Is like you don't need a ticket or you don't have to pay for this ticket. Just show in your ID and walk in. And in return, what I would always do is buy like a shirt or merch to like offset the ticket and take something home with me. And I was front row with the filter, and Richard Patrick was or is the lead singer, and he also did like guitar tech for Nine Inch Nails, and uh, and he saw me taking notes because I'm old school, and I write in my journal, like with my pen and my pad, and like people can be bumping me, and I'll still have everything intact, and I was taking photos the whole thing, and uh anywho, I think Reliant K was on the bill with them or something like that, and another band that I can't remember. So I was front row. People were bumping into me, and I was taking notes and taking photos with my Canon T3. And I think kept on. He It shocked me because I didn't expect this to happen. I was minding my business, taking notes, and he grabs my pen and my journal as he was singing, and he autographs it and he hands it back to me, and I looked at it and it said Richard Patrick Filter. And I was like, man, that is so rad, and um that's my story with Filter at the Roxy. And but another cool thing about Filter, I saw them in Denver. I think it was called the last summer on Earth or something like that. With bare naked ladies, and I had another journal autographed by Richard Patrick that day, and then I saw him at Welcome to Rockville like a couple years ago, which is a cool thing because like Welcome to Rockville was supposed to happen this weekend at Daytona, but COVID knocked our plans off the rocker or off its axis, if you will. And I got to interview Richard Patrick there for my own publication, cutiepie.com. You'll see on scrolling on the bottom there. And it's also on my YouTube channel, so please subscribe to that too. And so you'll see those interviews at my website and on this channel on my main screen on YouTube. And but yeah, Richard Patrick autographed my journals in 3 different time zones, and that was like the coolest thing to me. As I mentioned, Jeff wore a Misfits shirt. I'll never forget that, you know. And as I mentioned earlier, he was or he is the drummer for Perfect Circle too, and Pussifer too. And those are like my other favorite bands. I have like a lot of favorite bands, but a Perfect Circle and Pussifer like mean a lot to me. But and the reason why is because like before I became a concert journalist, I went and saw the Perfect Circle at the Gibson Amphitheater, and I had nosebleed tickets to go see him. So this is the bonus story with the Perfect Circle. Um, and I remembered picking up some wine at a liquor store in Studio City, California, and well, this guy Steve was working there, and he noticed my American Vineyards hat that came with a bottle of wine that I bought from the factory itself, and he goes, "You know that they're playing yeah, at the Gibson Amphitheater in a couple days, right?" And I'm like, "Yep, that's the reason why I'm buying this Maynard's wine." He goes, "I also do catering there," and I'm like, "Really?" He goes, "Yeah." And I didn't believe him because like I was new in town or something, or it was like the place was new to me. He goes, "And if you want, I can hook you up with some backstage passes." I'm like, "It's smoke and mirrors." It's like, whatever, dude. I'll see it. I'll believe it when I see it. So I took my friend Steve. He did makeup for Clive Barker Studio, and he's like a friend of mine that came up with my Wu Tang superhero alter ego. And I picked up my tickets at the will call, and sure enough, there was some backstage pass bracelets waiting for us. And like Steve and I couldn't believe it. And we were like Wayne and Garth in Wayne's World, and we were just like, "Holy crap, we got bracelets to hang out with a Perfect Circle backstage." So we literally went from like nosebleeds to backstage, and like we were pretty much like in the like we were able to walk into like the pit too, which was pretty rad. And merch was like much cheaper, I think, backstage than it was in the front, if I can remember. But I bought like all kinds of merch from the bands, a Perfect Circle mainly, and I think like a Japanese band had opened up for him that night, if I can remember. But I remember James Eha. He played or he still plays good his instrument. He still plays with the Smashing Pumpkins. He's also in a Perfect Circle. He was hanging out in um just on his phone, and I saw Jeff Friedel back there, the drummer for Filter, back there, and I saw Matt McJunkins. He also plays for Pussifer too, and Billy Howardell, and uh, I had a poster in hand, and Jeff like I asked him if he had a Sharpie because I didn't, and he looked all over the place for a Sharpie, which meant a lot to me. So shout out to Jeff for doing that. That was pretty rad. And in his most he has another side project Jeff does called the Beta Machine. And in that first like his first EP called All This Time, I have it here. It's pretty rad. Pick it up on their web store. There you are. And if you open it up, you can see my name in there with Billy's name and Matt's name and Maynard's name in there. So that was pretty gnarly of them to put it in there. I actually paid $50 to have my name put in there, and it was pretty gnarly. Um, so how does this tie into Bazaar Ride Live? Well, Bazaar Ride Live, if you don't know, uh, was uh, called the Far Side, but they were members of the Far Side, but they broke up. And uh, the same thing happened. What Richard Patrick did to my journal was the same thing that Slim Kid Trey did in Bazaar Ride Live to my journal, which is grab my journal out of my hand while I was working from front row, autographed it while he was performing, and handed it right back. And it's in my very first journal too, which is pretty awesome. And my very first journal, which I don't have beside me, which bums me out, was given to me by Clive when I was his apprentice for like the summer of 2009 or something. But I was his apprentice from like then to 2013, 2014. But I told him I had I just used note cards the whole time, and he gave me the journal from his desk, and I filled it out with all the concerts that I had to cover. Had ticket stubs and photo passes in them, and I gave it back to Clive, but he autographed that, and he drew like a penis with wings on it, and he gave it right back to me, and he said, "Keep it." I'm like, "Wow, that's pretty cool." But I ended up giving him another one with a like a William Blake journal. But anywho, how the filter story ties into the Misfit story was that how Jeff wore the Misfits shirt, and as I mentioned, uh, the Misfits, they were playing Halloween night, or yeah, at the Gibson where I saw a Perfect Circle, and the Misfits played Halloween night one year, and on the bill was Danzig. It was called the Danzig Legacy Show. It was Danzig, Sam Hain, and Misfits, and uh, the guy that played Jason in like the Friday the 13th remakes, and like he was in The Longest Yard, I think. His name is Andrew. Um, he often came up to Clive's studio, and like the old VP told him that yeah, he's going to the Misfits show too, and I'm like, really? And I'm like, yeah, and Steve, he hooked me up with backstage passes again to this show, and I can't, I'm really grateful for Steve from the liquor store, and I go to this. It's Halloween night. I dress up as Wu Manchu, my superhero alter ego, and if you can imagine, I'm all hip hopped out at this Misfits show on Halloween night, Danzig and Sam Hain, and I took Leatherface to the show, and he goes, if anybody messes with you, I'll beat him up. And there's nothing like having Leatherface have your back, and so I was in the pit the whole time, uh, and he was like, he took his seats, and after the show, we went backstage, and Misfits, Danzig, Sam Hain were back there. Typo Negative was back there. Puddle of Mud was back there, and some of the Jackass dudes from the TV show were there. It was like the most insane Halloween ever. And I think a couple days ago, before that wild show, was I went dressed up as Wu Manchu again, and I went and saw Volto at the Baked Potato in Studio City. And if you don't know who Volto is, they're a pretty cool band. And the drummer is Danny Carey from Tool, and so that's the Tool, Volto, and a Perfect Circle connection there. And my friend John plays guitar for the band, and he also gives lessons out. Or he doesn't give, but you got to pay for those lessons. But uh, it was a really cool show, and I was dressed up in costume again because I usually go out for Halloween weekend, and that's how my filter story is linked to the Misfits, Danzig, Sam Hain, Typo Negative, Puddle of Mud, Volto, Bizarre Ride Live, and a Perfect Circle. And every week I'll be telling more stories to raise funds for the Rainbow Bar and Grill, the Viper Room, Amoeba, the Troubadour, the Corazon Cinema and Cafe, the Laugh Factory, the world famous Comedy Store, and Whiskey A Go Go. Because while I was out there, they were all my safe havens, other than Clive's studio. Um, and I couldn't have asked for like better places to go when I was like, I didn't have any family out there, and I was like in a city full of millions of people, and I'm quite thankful for all those venues, and this is my way of giving back to those venues for keeping me safe all those years and allowing me to see my favorite rock bands um, and experiencing life as if it was the movie Almost Famous, but instead of following one band, it was like all my favorite bands, and it didn't matter if the show was sold out or not. I was able to see them, and they love the way that I write. And the reason why they love the way that I write, I thank Clive every day for, is because he tweeted this tweet that said, "Sreth is a gentleman and much loved in my household. I hold him in the highest regard." And that's pretty much like Stephen King when he co-signed Clive back in the '80s, and that was just rad. Um, Anywho, thanks for watching. I guess I'll open it up for the Q&A session now, and if you have any questions, comment below. I'll see them on my screen too. Other than that, I'll leave it up for like 3 more minutes. I'll chill with you guys. Um, and yeah, and so pretty much this is like my SOS to the world. This is my message in a bottle. Because we're all stuck in quarantine. But I figured we might as well start some shows while I'm stuck in the house. Next week, I'm interviewing a band, my friend Dean DiCioso, and he was in a band called Dead End Amelia, and they were like a local band out in LA. And I met him at the Viper Room, which is pretty gnarly, and I got to see him perform at Hemingway's and the Troubadour, and so I'm glad I get to raise funds for those. Well, the Hemingways is no longer around, but I remembered how awesome that venue was because it had all these books in the background. Um, but yeah, other than that, I'll probably end this at 18 minutes because it's pretty awkward to talk to yourself for like, I don't know, 3 minutes. Um, but yeah, he's my next guest, and tomorrow I'm interviewing Ernest Garduno of Beneath the Floorboards. I'm calling that one the Wu Manchu Chronicles, and I'm dressed as my superhero alter ego. And he's performing at my festival called Sreth Fest Music and Comedy Festival. And I see a WTW. I don't know what that means. I'm not stuck with the lingo, Dan. Um, let's see here. But yeah, Ernest is my next guest tomorrow. He's performing at my festival in Colorado in July if this COVID lifts up. If you're free, the festival is free. It's 5 days long, music and comedy, and it's going to be a pretty awesome show. It's all pretty much local bands. If you love local stuff, they play original music. It's mostly metal. There's folk. There's jazz. There's reggae. There's hip hop. Mostly metal, deathcore, psychobilly. It's everything you love about music. It's like the real life Spotify, and yeah, we've been going on for 7 years now, and all the artists get compensated, and I just want to build their fan bases. So tomorrow, you get to meet Ernest, and he's a cool cat, and in fact, his band is on my YouTube channel under the live streams of Sreth Fest. Check that out. They're called Beneath the Floorboards. They rock. And check out my other stuff too, and like and subscribe. And I'll like and subscribe to your channel too. And I have um 20 seconds left, and then I'll sign off. But thank you guys so much for tuning in. Tune in tomorrow for Ernest, and tune in next Sunday night for Dean. And yeah, that should be some fun times, and hopefully, sure, bands from my hometown to you. All right, everyone. Good